Hello everybody and welcome to another board game discussion video. Today's topic is all about asymptotes in board games. I know you math nerds are super excited right now, but for everybody else, an asymptote is essentially an imaginary line on a graph where a function will get really close, but never actually touch it. And in board games, this is often going to be referring to victory points and things like that, where you have essentially a theoretical maximum. And the limit as x, where x is the number of victory points, approaches that theoretical limit, then it gets closer and closer, but never actually touches it. Now, I'm going to be talking about a few things. First and foremost, why are we talking about this? Secondly, seriously, why are we talking about this? And third, what are the implications of this when it comes to design, teaching, and all this other stuff related to board games? First off, why are we talking about this? Well, it's an excuse to wear my new awesome shirt. It has Gandalf saying, "You shall not pass," and an approximate graph of the f of x is equal to -1 over x minus 2. Ish. And so that's awesome. Secondly, seriously, why are we talking about this? Well, one of the first things that people ask whenever they're playing a new game or whenever they're being taught a new game is, how many points should I expect to get? What is reasonable? What makes sense? What should I get? And if you have 120 or 150 or 50 or 60 or whatever it is that a good score? What defines a good score in the context of the game? How can you tell? So many games have the victory point track that you're going around and around and around. Some of them give you little chips when you go around a full time, and then you just keep going, all of that kind of stuff. And so the question becomes, what is the absolute potential maximum that you can get? And the fact is that every single game has something along these lines. So I wanted to talk about 3 specific cases of this. First and foremost is Gloom. Gloom is a very simple game where you have a family of 5 people and you want them to die in the most horrific and hilarious way possible. Sounds morbid, but really fun. The idea is that you put cards on top of the people and it gives them hopefully negative points. The more negative points you have, the closer you are to winning. And theoretically in this game, every person can die with, well, the highest that a person can die with is upwards of about 95 or so, 90 to 95, depending on the cards that you get and how they're arranged. And also if you have expansions and stuff. But for the base game, we're sticking with that. On average, the maximum that you can get is going to be closer to about 70 to 75. So with 5 people, assuming that you get to the maximum, you're looking at about 385 or so points. Now, is that possible? That is a theoretical maximum. The answer is no. The reason being that if you have people who are playing even reasonably competently, you are never going to reach it, because in Gloom, you take 2 actions. You play one card, you play another card, or you can like discard your hand, and there's a few other things. The problem is you can only kill one of your people on your first turn, and that is, this is the perfect setup, I'm ready to go, I've got maximum minuses, and I can get a bonus from this particular death. Awesome, let's do this. But then all of your other people are still there. The thing is that as your second action, you can play cards on other people. You can force somebody else to die when it's not an ideal time for them to die. You can play pluses on them to negate any minuses that they have. You can do all sorts of stuff like that. So you will never, ever get to that 380, 385 level. So what should you do? Well, think about it in this way. Cut that maximum, that theoretical asymptote, in half or about a third even, and that would be a pretty solid score if you are playing with people who are serious and actually focusing on the game and doing all of that kind of stuff. It's something that designers and publishers and all of these types of people have to think about when they are making games. You have to think, what are people going to do? How are they going to play? How well are they going to do? And what's going to happen? And that's what we need to see, right? The second one that I wanted to talk about really quickly is Power Grid. So this one's a little bit different because the idea of this is the end goal actually shifts depending on the number of players you have, where the whole point is that you need to have some number of houses that you're able to power with your power plants. And the more people you have, the fewer number of houses that you need. Theoretically though, if you have the maximum number of players, you could reach the maximum number of buildings, and you could power all of them. Now, does that give you any sort of particular advantage? Not necessarily, except for the fact that if you're the only one who did it, then you win. But the thing is, if the players are playing the way that they should be, you will never be able to get that to happen in a 6-player game. I believe that the trigger for the end game is somewhere around 12 or 14, if memory serves, when you have that many players. And then the most houses that you can build is something like 24. So you would have to have a massive final turn to build all of those houses at once, plus have the resources to be able to power them, the power plants that have the capacity to power them, and all of that kind of stuff. It is theoretically possible, but it is never going to happen in a real world situation. And so again, what is reasonable for a game like Power Grid? Well, you can relatively easily have 1, 2, or potentially 3 more houses than you need in order to trigger the end game. And that will typically enable you to win. So again, we're looking at, you know, half, a third, somewhere around there, that type of thing. That is what we're hoping for. You can also consider things like how many rounds does it take and stuff like that. On that note, let's take a look at chess. Does chess have an asymptote? That's more of a philosophical question, isn't it? What would it be considered? Would it be a minimum number of moves? Well, I think the minimum number is, I believe, 3, where you move your queen's pawn up, and then they move their king's pawn up, and then you move your knight over, and then they can move their bishop in and immediately checkmate your king. Not ideal, but it can happen. That is a move that can happen. What about all of your pawns reaching the other side of the board and all becoming queens? Is that possible? Technically, yes. Will it happen? Almost certainly no. Is it possible for you to capture literally every single piece of your opponent, every single one of your opponent's pieces, while you still have every single one of your pieces? Technically, yes, it is possible. Will it ever happen? Highly doubtful. Again, this is the type of thing to think about, but obviously in chess and other abstract games, it's not about points. It's not about how many points do you get for capturing a knight versus a queen versus a bishop or things like that. Although there are certainly pieces that are considered more valuable than others, you are not keeping score in that sense. It's just who gets checkmate. Whereas in games like Settlers of Catan or Power Grid or, you know, any of these other games where you're talking about victory points, that's what we're talking about here. How many points do you need to win versus how many points can you potentially get if you essentially had no obstacles and all of the luck in the world. So luck comes into play with things like Kingsburg, where you have to roll dice to determine what types of workers you can get, thus determining where you can go and what resources you're able to get. Stuff like that can always throw a wrench into things. And so when designers are coming up with these games, they have to think, okay, well, this is how you can earn points, this is what makes sense, and so let's test this practically to death so that we can see what an average score for an average player is going to be. Because that way we can sort of see, okay, we need to make the board look like this, and we have upwards of 50 or 100 or whatever points on our little track. And then if we need one, do we have a catch-up mechanic? How well does that work? How much does it push people forward? All of that sort of thing. That becomes critical, right? I don't know how many designers think about what the theoretical maximum of their games are. I think it's kind of fun to think about. I like to think that Reiner Knizia does, because he has a PhD in mathematics and he has designed hundreds of games, and it just seems like a fun thing to try and calculate. But that's just me, and I'm kind of a nerd. So moving right on, why does this matter? Why is it important? Well, I just said for publishers and stuff like that, we need to think about what is it going to be as far as the players are concerned. What can they get? What can't they get? How much can they get? And how well is it going to affect them? Is it a good score? For new players especially, this is a critical thing to think about. If you're teaching a game, then say, well, on average, you're going to be getting around this many points. If you get that many points, then you're in a good spot. You did well, right? If you're playing Gloom and you get over 300 points, you probably cheated. right? That's just a fact, because it just doesn't make any sense. And so that's kind of the way that you can view this particular video, is as a guide for teaching new people. Is what is it that I can absolutely maximally get in terms of how many rounds could it take for me to win in something like Race for the Galaxy? How many points do I need to get in order to win? What is the maximum number of points that I can theoretically get? All of that kind of stuff, and then slice it and dice it to get some reasonable numbers that people can actually achieve. It is something that's important. I don't know if anybody thinks about it though. So I'm curious, do you think about it? Let me know in the comments below. I want to know what you guys have to think about asymptotes in board games, if you've ever thought about it, if it's ever crossed your mind, if you care about it. Because for me, I think it's kind of a cool concept to think about, and all in all, it's just an interesting thing. So as always, let me know anything and everything you think in the comments below, because I love to hear it all. That said, of course, as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my various social media pages where you can interact with myself and my channel in a bunch of really fun ways. And we are beating back COVID. We have given a lot of vaccines here in the US. Numbers are going down, but it is not over. This is still a global crisis. We are still seeing surges all across the world. We still have to be careful. So everybody, please stay safe. Please stay smart. Keep your family safe, your friends safe, and all of that kind of stuff. Be well, be healthy. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.